Main event of the evening.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 9, Episode 5, Little Baby Cunningham.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Little Baby Cunningham.
We open in the Cunningham living room, where Marion is practicing diapers on a doll with Howard.
You know, Howard, in 2 months we're going to be doing this with a real baby.
Yeah, I know that, sweetheart.
Joni greets Chachi at the door with a kiss, and they leave for a date.
I'll have it back in a couple of weeks.
Lori Beth comes downstairs, reporting that the doctor said she and the baby are both healthy. Another pregnant woman she was talking to told her about a new technique, natural childbirth, where the father stays with the mother throughout the birthing process and helps her with breathing techniques, and there's hardly any pain.
This is a whole new way of having a baby.
A new way of having a baby?
Didn't we do it right?
Marion thinks it sounds wonderful. When she gave birth to Richie and Joni, she was wheeled into a bright room alone and had a gas mask shoved onto her face, and then she woke up and had a baby. Fonzie comes downstairs and greets Lori Beth and the baby. Marion invites Howard upstairs so she can show him how to bathe the baby, and Howard can be the baby. Howard scrambles to go with her. Lori Beth asks Fonzie to accompany her to birthing classes in Richie's stead, and he accepts.
I would be tickled pink to do whatever Red does.
At birthing class, the nurse leading it invites everyone to introduce themselves and say why they chose natural childbirth. Naturally, Fonzie introducing Lori Beth with a different surname causes some scandal.
Did you hear that? Different last names. Little unmarried action over there, huh, Mr. Fonzarelli?
No there, Lionel.
Until Lori Beth explains her husband is the father of her child, he's just in Greenland. Fonzie is also shocked to hear that the process involves him being with Lori Beth the whole time that she's giving birth. The nurse shows slides of the birthing process, and Fonzie does not react well to them.
And here we see the husband coaching the wife through a strong labor contraction.
Ooh.
Sometime later at Arnold's, Jenny is stalking a very annoyed Roger.
No, when I left my house this morning, you jumped on the hood of my car.
I needed a ride.
Lori Beth reminds Fonzie the last class is tonight, and then Fonzie takes Roger aside to confide his fears about being in the room with Lori Beth while she's giving birth.
When that baby starts to poke its head through, I'm talking about fainting away. I'm talking horizontal city, kiss and shoot.
While Fonzie's in his office, Lori Beth starts having contractions, even though she's not due for 2 weeks. Al, panicking, almost hits Roger with a baseball bat.
Al, you slapped me. Can't you see she's having a baby? Give me the bat!
When Fonzie comes out and hears that Lori Beth is having a baby, as in right now, he also panics, and Lori Beth has to tell him to take her to the hospital. Lori Beth is brought in a wheelchair, and so is Fonzie. Since Lori Beth's contractions are 10 minutes apart, she's put in a bed to wait for the doctor. When the nurse goes to stop a loon in a baseball helmet running in the hallway,
She's having a baby! She's having a baby!
Fonzie shouts for her to see how long it takes her to come back. She very bluntly tells him not to do that again. In the waiting room, Howard, Marion, Joni, and Chachi arrive, while Fonzie continues to help Lori Beth with breathing. Lori Beth's contractions are getting stronger,
And Leon's getting larger.
and Dr. Crane enters as a panicky Fonzie sings to himself. In the waiting room, Marion and Howard reminisce about the births of Richie and Joni and reaffirm their love for each other.
Where did all the time go?
I don't know, but I'm sure glad I spent it all with you.
Fonzie is given a gown and a mask for the delivery room. As she's wheeled out, Lori Beth shouts that she needs Fonzie,
Fonzie, I need you!
Why does she need me?
and Fonzie manages to overcome his fear and follow her, humming the William Tell overture. While Lori Beth gives birth to a little boy, Fonzie is with her every moment. He's the first person to hold the baby, and then gives him to Lori Beth.
Hey, you want to meet Mom? She's great. We love her.
3 days later, Lori Beth still has yet to hear from Richie because he's been sent out on maneuvers. Howard takes everyone upstairs to look at the baby, while Fonzie stays downstairs to answer the phone. It's Richie, and Fonzie tells him his son is adorable.
Of course your boy is cute, huh? Red hair, big ears.
And that Richie gave him one of the highlights of his life. Even so, he faints as he tries to describe the actual birth.
When I saw that head poking...
Thank you, Peter. That was Little Baby Cunningham. It first aired back on November 3rd, 1981.
Tuesday,
I can't wait till you're born so I can go snooky pootsy poop.
there's a little Cunningham on the way.
Howard, we're going to be grandparents.
It's Lori Beth's baby. Happy Days.
That night, Happy Days was followed by a new Laverne and Shirley in which Laverne's old boyfriend, who is now wealthy, comes back into her life and proposes.
Oh, Laverne.
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
A romantic toast to the future.
Could you say that into my sober ear?
I want you to marry me, Laverne.
Laverne and Shirley.
CBS had a new episode of The Dukes of Hazzard in which the Duke boys learn that Boss Hogg is stealing motorcycles in order to rig an upcoming motocross race. And NBC ran the pilot for its new series, Father Murphy. This Western drama from the makers of Little House on the Prairie starred former NFL player Merlin Olsen as an 1870s frontiersman who pretends to be a priest and agrees to shelter a group of orphans rather than have them sent to a workhouse.
We're looking forward to seeing you Tuesday on NBC.
In the pilot, Murphy establishes a school for his kids while running afoul of a greedy town boss. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I am going to have to go with the Dukes of Hazzard. Just because I want to find out about Boss Hogg's upcoming motocross race. That sounds very exciting.
I would definitely have been tuned to the Dukes of Hazzard. I was a little bit intrigued by Father Murphy. I remember that NBC gave that show a huge promotional push at the time. There were even Father Murphy Halloween costumes. And they now turn up on the internet on those lists of dumbest and worst Halloween costumes of all time. Like, what kid wanted to go as Father Murphy?
Oh, wow.
I think we both know the answer to that. Oh, lucky boy.
Little Baby Cunningham was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Fred Fox Jr. and Babaloo Mandel. This is Babaloo's last script credit on the show. But he was on the writing staff of Happy Days for seasons 7 through 9. His job title was story consultant.
We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen.
As for guest stars this week, boy, do we have them. Let's start with Ralph Wilcox as Lionel Collins, an expectant father.
I'm Lionel Collins, and this is my wife, Donna, and we're here because she made me come.
Ralph is an actor from Milwaukee who worked in TV and film from the early 1970s to the late 2010s. He'd previously appeared on Happy Days as the wrongly accused Jason Davis in Fonzie for the Defense. Between his two Happy Days episodes, he was in More American Graffiti with Ron Howard. The last time we talked about his career, I failed to mention that he was in Megaforce with Barry Bostwick.
Megaforce, an elite compact fighting unit armed with the most sophisticated weapons ever seen on a movie screen.
Peter, what did you think of Ralph Wilcox as Lionel Collins?
I thought it was nice that he was probably the other person at the natural childbirth class who got the most to do, and I think we got the most idea of his personality. You know, he cracks a lot of jokes, and I kind of got the sense that he's doing that to mask his discomfort with the whole thing. So you can kind of see him as a reflection of Fonzie in that way, except he's handling his discomfort much better than Fonzie is up until the end.
I thought Ralph Wilcox was quite amusing as this expectant father who is, like Fonzie, uncomfortable to be in a Lamaze class. You know what I think would have been a nice touch? If he had actually been Jason Davis from Fonzie for the Defense, and now we see that Jason is married and is having a kid.
And he bought a new car and his wife was having a kid and all this miserable stuff.
And we're seeing him a little later in his life and getting a little update on what happened to that character.
Maybe it secretly is the same person. Maybe he just went into like witness protection or something.
After that trial, he may have wanted to change his name. We also have Lynn Hallowell as Patty Downs, the natural childbirth instructor.
I'm a registered nurse, and I'll be your instructor.
Instruct the way. We're all ears and tummies, right?
Lynn worked in TV and film for about a decade, from the late 70s to the late 80s. Her movies include Body Heat, Any Which Way You Can, Zelly and Me, and Going Berserk. Her TV credits include Family and TJ Hooker. Peter, did Lynn Hallowell make any impression on you as Patty Downs?
She has a very good, cheerful yet kind of deadpan effect that I thought worked very well for this nurse who is leading this class. I loved her delivery when she was going over like the slideshow showing the birthing process.
Here we see the couple in the delivery room as they are about to give birth using natural childbirth techniques.
I thought she brought some very convincing professionalism to this part.
It's your professionalism that I respect.
There might be a temptation to write this part a little wackier, but she's not written like that at all. She's written as a responsible and very pleasant nurse, and I thought Lynn Hallowell played that pretty well. We also have Diane Ainsley as the nurse at the hospital.
I have got to go and try to catch some loon in a baseball helmet who's running up and down the hall.
Diane is a New York-based stage actress, theater director, and acting teacher with just a couple of TV credits. Basically, this episode of Happy Days and a 2014 episode of The Michael J. Fox Show. Her Broadway credits include Fools and What Makes Sammy Run. Peter, what did you think of Diane Ainsley as our nurse?
She was great. You get the sense that she's a very serious lady who doesn't react well to fools and people who are panicking and having mental breakdowns in the hospital, which is probably a good thing when the typical sitcom trope of the panicking, expectant father.
I thought Diane Ainsley was the comedic highlight of this episode, and I loved her rising irritation with Fonz and Al, and it was surprising to me that Diane didn't do a bunch of sitcoms and a bunch of movies because she's so funny here and such a good actress. We also have Jeremy Lawrence as Dr. Crane.
All right, Lori Beth. Looks like the big day is finally here, huh? Let's have a look.
Jeremy has been working in TV and film since the late 70s. His movies include Ron Howard's Night Shift, plus Critters, Body Double, Book of Love, and Private Resort. His TV credits include Highway to Heaven, Night Court, ER, and The Drew Carey Show. In more recent years, you might have seen Jeremy on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Girls 5 Eva, New Amsterdam, Dickinson, and The Blacklist. Peter, what did you think of Jeremy Lawrence as Dr. Crane?
He doesn't really make much of an impression, I'm sorry to say.
He does not. He is just another professional. Again, I would have been tempted to write the doctor a little wackier, but it's not that kind of episode.
Yeah, and most of the wackiness in this episode comes from Fonzie, so it's important to give him like straight men to play off of.
We also have Marilyn Allen as Elaine Benton, an expectant mother.
My name's Elaine Benton, and this is my husband, John. And we're here so we'll be able to experience the most incredible moment in a human's life.
Marilyn is a TV and film actress with credits ranging from the late 70s to the early 2000s. You could have seen her on Dynasty, The Incredible Hulk, Matlock, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, Newhart, Home and Away, and A Country Practice. Peter, what did you think of Marilyn Allen as Elaine Benton?
Which of the expectant mothers was she?
I think you just reviewed her performance.
Yeah, Peter. I'm sorry.
That also applies to Michael Byers as Walter Melman, another expectant father.
My name is Walter Melman, and this is my wife, Judy, and we're here because we want to see our baby born naturally. Naturally.
Michael has just a handful of TV and film credits in the 70s and 80s. He's in Postcards from the Edge and Record City, plus an episode of Fantasy Island. Peter, do you remember Michael Byers as Walter Melman?
He's like a nerd, right?
Yes, he is the nerdy dad. So at least Michael Byers has a hook where you can remember him. Also, his name sounds like Michael Myers. As for songs this week, we hear Blowin' in the Wind by Peter, Paul, and Mary. It's heard playing very quietly at Arnold's. Bob Dylan wrote and recorded the song in 1962, then released it as a single in 1963.
How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man?
But it was the Peter, Paul, and Mary version that became a big hit, peaking at number 2 in 1963.
How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man?
I have to correct myself now.
I was ruined.
I said that American Musical was the singingest that Fonzie ever gets on Happy Days. I was so wrong. This episode is by far the singingest that Fonzie ever gets. Henry Winkler sings Blue Moon.
Blue Moon.
The baby's in position. You ready?
This is yet another composition by Rodgers and Hart. Debuting in 1934, it's been recorded by many artists, including Mel Torme, Frank Sinatra, and Ella Fitzgerald, but I'll bet that Fonzie is referring to the doo-wop version by the Marcells that hit number 1 in 1961.
Ding it on the blue moon. You saw me standing alone.
Peter, what did you think of Henry Winkler singing Blue Moon?
It was very fun. It helps that it's not actual singing. He's just kind of mumbling to himself as a means of staying calm.
I thought it was very funny that Blue Moon was his comfort song.
It's an interesting little glimpse into his psyche.
Henry Winkler also sings a portion of the William Tell Overture. This comes from an 1829 opera by Rossini. The Lone Ranger has been using it as his theme song since his radio days in the early 1930s. It became the theme to his television show in 1949.
The Lone Ranger.
That is much more on brand for Fonzie because he's so closely associated with the Lone Ranger.
When he's doing the William Tell Overture, that's because he's a Lone Ranger superfan.
And finally, Henry Winkler sings The Wheels on the Bus.
And the people on the bus go up and down, up and down, as they walk.
This is a popular children's song written by a woman named Verna Hills in 1937. The melody comes from the traditional British song, Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush.
Here we go round the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush, the mulberry bush.
As for cultural and historical references, as far as I can determine, Nice Nice is not a widely used euphemism for defecation or urination apart from this episode. Had you heard nice anywhere?
Absolutely not.
I think that's one that the writers made up. Throughout this episode, we see characters using cloth diapers. Disposable diapers have been available since 1948 when they were first marketed by Johnson & Johnson, but it wasn't until 1961 that Procter & Gamble truly changed the market by the introduction of Pampers.
I put her in Pampers. No more washing for me. You just flush them away.
Flush them. Terrific.
So that would have been pretty new to the Cunninghams. Another big theme of this episode is natural childbirth. That term was first introduced by a British obstetrician named Grantley Dick Reed in 1933. The Industrial Revolution had caused women to give birth in hospitals, often under the effect of painkillers, rather than at home. Dick Reed advocated against the use of medical intervention during childbirth. Lori Beth says natural childbirth is something new. What she's probably referring to is the Lamaze method, named for a French obstetrician and popularized by a 1959 book called Thank You, Dr. Lamaze. Natural childbirth really took off in popularity during the 1970s. Fonzie jokes that Richie and Lori Beth's baby thinks it's a rockette.
Whoa, I tell you something. Who's ever in there thinks it's a rocket, you know?
The Rockettes are a precision dance team originally formed in St. Louis in 1925. In 1932, they started performing at New York City's Radio City Music Hall and became famous for their annual Christmas shows. The Rockettes are tall dancers with long legs capable of doing eye-high kicks.
1, 2, 3, kick.
Fonzie says that Lori Beth is with papoose. The name papoose can mean child. It can also specifically refer to Native American children. It originally came from the Narragansett tribe and was popularized by Puritan minister Roger Williams in his 1643 book, A Key into the Language of America. Fonzie refers to the births of Adam and Eve, the first two humans mentioned in the Bible.
What did you think it was?
I thought it was natural childbirth. You're in the delivery room giving birth to the baby. I'm in a waiting room with a lot of other fathers and cigars. This is fantastic. I mean, it worked for Adam and Eve. Why fool around with this?
According to the book of Genesis, neither Adam nor Eve was born in a hospital. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 says that God formed man from the dust of the ground. And in verses 20 and 21, he takes a rib from Adam's body and makes Eve out of that. Al says that his batting helmet was free with Raleigh coupons.
Free with Raleigh coupons? Nice.
Raleigh was a line of cigarettes from the now-defunct Brown & Williamson Tobacco Company. In the 1960s, Raleigh was famous for including coupons in packs of cigarettes. These coupons could be saved and redeemed for prizes.
These flower shears? That lawn sprinkler? I got them free. Free for Raleigh coupons.
Fonzie refers to the nurse as Florence Nightmare.
Oh, that's great. Look what we got for a nurse. Florence Nightmare.
Florence Nightingale, who was born into a wealthy English family in 1820, virtually invented the nursing profession, which is why her name is still synonymous with nursing today. She was especially famous for tending to soldiers during the Crimean War.
May I just say that Florence Nightingale would make a great drag name or a great roller derby name. So if you're listening to this and you need either of those, snatch it up.
Howard refers to the giant panda bear as Mighty Joe Young.
Couldn't you have left Mighty Joe Young in the car?
This is a 1949 film about a giant gorilla raised by a human woman. It's from the makers of King Kong.
See Mighty Joe Young as he savagely resists capture in his native Africa.
What did you think of that giant panda bear, by the way?
Oh, it was terrifying.
I think any child would be very scared of that bear, especially if you had it in their room and when they woke up, they would see this giant bear looming over them. Oh, yeah. The nurse says that Lori Beth is carrying the ball, but she hasn't crossed the goal line yet. Marion doesn't know what that means. Obviously, in football, one needs to cross the goal line while carrying the ball to score a touchdown. And Richie is said to be on maneuvers. Marion also asks what that means.
What is a maneuver?
I'll show you later, sweetheart.
A maneuver is an extended and large-scale training exercise involving military and naval units separately or in combination. And Fonzie says he had certain peccadillos while going into the delivery room.
I had, certain peccadillos I got to tell the truth about going into that delivery room,
A peccadillo is a relatively minor sin. What word do you think Fonzie was trying to go for when he said peccadillo?
I honestly do not know.
I think what he means is that he was a little bit hesitant to go into the delivery room, so he had trepidations or reservations, but I don't know why he said peccadillos. Fonzie probably does have some peccadillos.
Yeah, but this might not be one of them. Because in the end, he overcomes his fears, and he's able to be there for Lori Beth when she and the baby need him, so that's great.
Other observations this week, Howard's discomfort during Marion's story is quite amusing. Nice, subtle acting by Tom Bosley. There was one line read in particular where he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, dear."
Oh, when I had Richie and Joni, it wasn't a very pleasant experience.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, dear.
It was nice.
It's also nice that Howard and Marion are still getting their kink on, though I did not need to know about their adult baby role-playing.
Howard, come on upstairs. I want to show you how to bathe the baby.
Oh, I already know how to do that, sweetheart.
You can bathe the baby.
Honestly, that kind of delighted me because it's the kind of thing you throw in when you don't realize how weird it is. Like the erotic Huey, Louie, and Dewey cosplay from an earlier episode.
Howard and Marion are into some weirder stuff, and we get some hints of that in the dialogue. Jenny's pursuit of Roger becomes a shade problematic when you consider that Jenny is still a student at Jefferson High and Roger is teaching there.
Young teacher of the subject of schoolgirl fantasy.
Maybe she's 18. What do you think, Peter?
Jenny, you probably shouldn't be doing this. It does help that Roger is very clearly not taking her seriously at all, and he just wants her to leave him alone.
Roger does handle the situation appropriately and professionally. Good on you, Roger. And should Al and Fonzie be at all concerned that Arnold's is doing zero business?
Yes, they should.
Coach, this place is a real yawn.
Yeah, nothing's happening. You guys have time for your shenanigans because you don't have any customers at your restaurant. And I honestly did not expect Lori Beth to say the title of the episode out loud, so that was one genuine surprise.
Oh, Baby Cunningham.
It's kind of interesting that the baby is not named at all throughout this episode. A fun drinking game for this. Take a shot every time in the summary I said the baby.
And you will die of alcohol poisoning. But what I'm curious about is how big an impact will the baby have on Happy Days going forward? Is the show now going to become about basically a single mother raising an infant child in early 1960s America?
That would require the show to have more than a passing interest in Lori Beth as a character, so no.
So, Peter, I will ask, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
Sadly, no. Except for Al's baseball helmet. That was a fun little thing.
So, Peter, did you have any other observations that you wanted to make about little baby Cunningham?
I think my favorite moment in this episode was Marion's little monologue about what it was like to give birth to Richie and Joni.
You didn't know what was going to happen to you, and you were all alone in this strange place, and you had all this pain. And then they wheeled you into this delivery room with all the lights. Then they slapped a gas mask on your face. And then you woke up and you had a little tiny baby.
It's darker than Happy Days usually goes, and that's what I like about it, because childbirth has consistently been very traumatic because of the way that society devalues pregnancy and people who can get pregnant. So I like that this episode acknowledges that.
That is a very funny and dark monologue. What it reminded me of so much was the birth sketch that begins the movie Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Basically, a woman is wheeled into a delivery room and she's hooked up to all these machines, and the doctors talk down to her in a very condescending way.
Can I put the tube in the baby's head?
Only if I can do the episiotomy.
Okay.
There you go.
What do I do?
Nothing, dear. You're not qualified.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yeah, this was pretty good. It's not really a super funny episode, but there were some funny moments, and there were also some very sweet moments. And I felt like the moments that were intended to be sweet landed pretty well. Like Howard and Marion talking in the waiting room and reaffirming their love for each other. Fonzie overcoming his fears and helping Lori Beth, and doing so with the help of his favorite character. And also Fonzie holding the baby and then telling Richie about his son. That being said, it does bother me that if this episode can be said to be about anyone, I think it's about Fonzie. I feel like this episode should have been more Lori Beth centric. We don't really get a lot of interiority from her, although I do like that she's the one who's all in for the natural childbirth process. That is something that she is choosing for herself. The thing about Lori Beth is that she's a very put together person. She usually knows what she wants. As a result, she doesn't develop a lot as a character over the course of Happy Days.
You just vocalized exactly what my problem with Little Baby Cunningham is. This episode should be about Lori Beth, and it should at least be told from her perspective, but it's really all about Fonzie. In a lot of ways, it reminded me very, very much of RC and LB Forever. That was an episode where Lori Beth went through another major life milestone, and she's basically an extra in her own story. Once again, Richie is completely unavailable for this episode, so he's just a voice over the phone, and Fonzie steps in and takes center stage. And I think this episode would have worked better on me if there had been more distance between it and RC and LB Forever. It felt like we had just had this kind of story not too long ago, and now they were doing basically a variation on it again. That being said, there are some very nice moments in this. I like the stuff in the waiting room between Howard and Marion. I think Henry Winkler gives an excellent performance in this. This is a tour de force for him. He gets to go full comedy and full drama. I think when he's talking to Richie on the phone, he puts a lot of emotion into that. When he's talking to the baby in the delivery room, he puts a lot of feeling and emotion into that. So it's an excellent showcase for Fonzie. It's a very sentimental and heartwarming story. But again, there is a void at the middle of this story, and it's Lori Beth. What is Lori Beth thinking? What is she feeling? She's about to bring a child into this world on her own, basically. There's no husband there to be at her side. There's her husband's friend and her husband's family, but this other important person in her life is absent. How does she feel about that at this very important moment? We never know. So the show is not really interested in Lori Beth. Obviously, I can't say that people should skip Little Baby Cunningham. It's a milestone episode. It's well done. Definitely watch it, but it wasn't as satisfying to me as it could have been. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Roger gets pissy because a girl he likes won't date him in The Other Guy.
A Roger story. I did not see that coming. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Goo-goo, dada, goo-goo dada, goo-goo, dada, goo-goo dada. Mama, 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 goo-goo, dada, goo-goo dada. More that baby's talking, it won't be long until he's walking. He told me in his secret code he'd soon be heading for the road. More that young'un's talking.
Fonzie, I need you!
Why does she need me?